Five. Hello, I'm Aaron Justin Bryan from Table Knights Entertainment, and with me today is Giovanni Perez and Douglas Conrado, as always.
Hello.
Today on Talk 20 to Me, I always have my introductions interrupted by you two assholes.
What? We interrupted you? Gosh darn it.
Today we'll be discussing dungeon design. So, Douglas, what is the first dungeon you ever designed?
You see that? That equals how many times that my fucks were given to something and then I've had them destroyed.
What?
Because dungeons are a trial and error, folks. That's what dungeons are.
I was like, what does this have to do with anything?
Someone joined the call.
See, the beauty of... Hello. Okay, goodbye. The beauty about dungeons is how intricate and how interesting they may be. My first dungeon, the one that's actually been completed, is this one dungeon that I have made that has yet to be played yet, just because we've been beta testing the other dungeons, which so far, great success. They have been, so far they've all been well. Although one of them almost had a party wipe because everyone rolled low for their constitution check.
Well, that's a party design failure, not a dungeon design failure.
That was very interesting, which is weird because still the party was made mainly of dwarves.
Wait, what the?
Yeah, that's how bad the rolls were.
This is the Snow White and Seven Dwarfs campaign, I assume?
Yes.
That's still great.
Somehow we all failed to lose the roll.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room for a second. How do dwarves have low constitution?
No, they all have, only 2 of them have 20. No, not anymore, because he died several times. So they all have 18. Like, most of the dwarves in the party have 18 to, like, 16. I shit you not, everyone decided to roll 19s and 20s.
Okay, whatever. I don't understand what you're talking about.
But yes.
I think he's talking about, like, 3.5 will save, constitution, saving throws. Those kind of saving throws, not the ones that we use.
No, we use the Grindor system.
Oh, constitution. Sorry, I completely had a brain fart. My bad.
Okay.
Yeah, what you said made no sense. If all of their constitution are above 15, then it's not low constitution.
I mean, because you have to roll under, so they have to do a high roll to fail.
You're talking about constitution checks.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's different. Okay.
My bad. I worded that incorrectly. So, my first dungeon, although it has not been played yet, I took in quite a few hours and several days to complete it. Particularly, it took me longer to actually do the dungeon itself than the actual story. The reason that is being said is because dungeon design is much more intricate than you would think. You can't just simply say, "Oh, boss is here, go kill him." Yay. No, there are several levels to keep on going. There has to be a reason why this is there, why that is, existent. I mean, for those of you who've played RPGs, like actual video games, there are, intricate designs to the dungeon. You may not notice it, but each dungeon is designed a particular way for that specific story that dungeon has to provide. Just like if you take your time and check the dungeons out in Skyrim, there is actually a unique little story added to each dungeon that actually explains why it's designed that certain way. So, as in my case, my dungeon is made up to be somewhat of a small military compound, which, for those of you who will play it, I hope you do enjoy it. The likelihood of dying is quite reasonable because it's a fighting based dungeon. Mine's is it's driven by story, but it's made for fighting.
That's a good point to lead off on because I'm actually the complete polar opposite. My dungeons tend to be more based on puzzles and riddle solving, and even though of course there's going to be combat strewn without, but the intellect is kind of more welcomed in my kind of dungeons, and both in player and out of player intellect because I could allow the player themselves to solve these puzzles, but if things come to worse, I also have backup options where they could let their stats and rolls come into play in terms of how they solve a subject and or puzzle. Um, my first dungeon has actually my first two dungeons have yet to ever been played, and this is before I even started making my own campaign. These are dungeons that I made for the Grindorian system, and it's just they're both so high level that we're not even close to touching them yet. But I tend to make my dungeons a bit grandiose, and as a new campaign maker, I'm actually finding more of a struggle on making small-scale dungeons, which, as Doug pointed out earlier, dungeons of any variety are kind of hard to make because we all have our own preference, and breaking to the opposing side of that preference, we all meet our struggles. For me, I feel you're supposed to get lost in the world. So when I come up and have to be like, no, I need to make this a short dungeon, I'm always like, is this too short? Was that too easy? Did I not put enough puzzles, enough traps? And that's another different thing I have to point out. I don't put traps more so than I put puzzles. Yes, some of my puzzles do have a deadly aesthetic to them, which therefore makes them traps by definition. But I would rather slow down progress rather than hinder it altogether. I feel if they should die, it should be from a lack of skill, not like not just like some
A
phony
bad roll.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Not just some phony thing where like it just so happened to be 4 darts instead of 3. You're fucked.
Um, and that brings us to me, and I have designed dungeons on both ends of the spectrum. The first dungeon I ever designed, I started when I was 11, and it's called Hecklehide's Cave. It has been modified. Now it's 27 times. That shit's been in beta for years. um, but I tried to think what the best way to bring in every element that you could want in a starting dungeon to introduce new players, because I was new myself. So I designed it from my own perspective of being a new player. In the first floor, it's primarily just fighting, with some deadly occurrences in it if you're not paying attention. And then at the very end of the first floor, there is a puzzle. One puzzle. Which I thought gave a good balance and flavor to a beginner. Because they didn't, know everything about puzzle solving. They didn't know everything about fighting. And they were just new. And the best thing to do with new people is expose them to a little bit of everything. I've also done dungeons that were primarily puzzle-based, like the Crystal Forest. The vast majority of that was based around going to temples and solving riddles and puzzles, which I love riddles. Riddles are so much fun. And I feel like I made the best mesh of trap, puzzles, and fighting in the very last dungeon I've designed, Solis's Tower, which, I mean, you guys can be the verdict of that. I mean, I'm not the one who played through it.
I feel it was more so traps rather than it was puzzles, because none of
That's
them really
fair.
had a none of them really had a solve this aesthetic. It was more like survive this aesthetic. Doug.
Oh, right.
We're doing the thing, Doug.
Sorry, I'm sending messages back and forth to several people about some news about my dungeon.
Get off your dungeon. I mean, not your dungeon. Your messages.
Things. Bananas! Ah! Okay, so, aesthetics of dungeon.
The question was, how did you feel about the last few puzzles and/or dungeons in the tower we played?
Interesting to say
The balance of it. Like, where did you feel it lied?
You see, there's a reason why my dungeon is very fighter-based. Things because I myself am more of a. I consider myself a barbarian. If I were to like choose a character and be that character for life, I would be a barbarian. I'm sorry, but I have no love for mages. You guys are too fucking easy. Go fuck off. That's just me. If I can kill it with a bow or an arrow or some swords, then that's kind of me.
Douglas, I don't think that you heard the question.
You're not letting me. So, in terms of what I got from the dungeon, I enjoyed it. Because there was enough fighting to keep me entertained and be like, yeah! There was also enough sadness because, sad things. It's like, oh, poor lizard. Chops off head. No!
Oh my god, yeah, that was horrible.
And there was enough puzzles to, like, not enough to, like, be, like, in terms of, like, think of them as puzzles as, like, in God of War. They're there to, like, remind you not to just keep pressing X. You also have to think before you act.
I was gonna say, you have to use gore and terrible things to get through the level.
Don't forget the sex.
That's all God of War reminds me of.
Don't forget the sex minigames. Sex minigames for the win.
Let's move on to dungeon aesthetics, like the atmosphere and whatnot. I think Gio, that's your favorite part.
Yes.
So you go ahead and take off on
it. Everything. Well, I mean, I do notice an overarching theme that I even have in my campaign. Mind you, my first dungeon that I mentioned earlier has no connection to my current campaign, even though I could throw it in there just for the lulz. But I do notice that a lot of the times I like to dabble and test in fear-based aesthetics. Like, I want to create an atmosphere where people fear what's going on. Either they'll feel like they're in danger, they'll feel like something's not wrong. And I've had long discussions with Aaron about this, about how I guess you could say study. I study certain things that scare people and certain things that don't. And I notice like a lot of very specific things create genuine fear over other things.
Example?
And well, I find that people are more so scared of deformity rather than they are a total monster. If I were to go up to you and be like, look at this giant fucking bat that looks like a wolf with like that shoots fire, you're gonna be like, oh, cool, monster. Now, if I go up to you like, look at this woman with no eyes and no lower jaw, and all you see are the tendrils from her ripped jaw just like constantly moving there while she's choking on her own blood, you'd be more creeped out by the secondary one because
it creates a closer feeling. Yeah.
Exactly, because you are customary to seeing things usually the way they're supposed to be, and when something's off, distorted, or gored, that's when you start to get a feeling of uneasiness. And I noticed that it's scarier the more normal it looks. One of the best examples I could give you is The Ring. It's just a little fucking girl with her hair over her eyes. But any motherfucker, if they saw that in the middle of the night...
No!
Exactly. That's exactly... It's that fight or flight thing that it's like, no, I don't want you to have fight or flight. I want you to have that flight feeling. So that way, when you're going further into the dungeon, you're literally fighting your fear. I like the ideas of, when you tell someone, when you go into great detail about the tiny little prickles of a spider's legs going up your neck, and then suddenly the person has an itch.
Yeah,
Or
I
where
love
you
that
talk,
feeling.
or where you talk about there's a hallway of windows, and literally at the corner of each windows, you just see an eye of someone staring, or something to that effect, where you're faced with the norm, but something is off, and you don't want to be blatant about it because then it's not going to be as scary. Because if they see it immediately, then they recognize what the problem is, and they either avoid it or they attack it. But
They see the eye and
yeah.
they stab it.
Like one of the things that I was doing with my first dungeon was I was actually getting very deep in audio. I was listening to a bunch of songs because, of course, sound is one of the best things about atmosphere. Some of the best movies and best video games have been made due to their audio. Like, one of the movies that I think is great, and let me tell you, story plot-wise, subpar. But atmosphere and music, I love it to death. Sinister. That's the movie where the kids are killing their parents. Blah blah blah. Spoiler alert.
A good
But
game example of that would be that scene in Dead Space where you're running through the Ishimura for the first 10 minutes.
yeah,
There's nothing coming after you at all. It's just the sounds of the ship.
exactly. Like
Well,
audio
now you
is
actually meet your first necromorph, and then in which case you're just like, fuck!
yeah. But
Fuck!
audio is one of the things that builds up the atmosphere around you. That it builds your anxiety to the point where you're jumping at shadows and you're actually making more of the fear than what's going on around you.
And it's difficult for most dungeons to incorporate audio into the design intrinsically.
Yeah.
Because it's a paper medium. But I mean, if you can do it, do it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Douglas, your view on aesthetics. What is your favorite aesthetic for
So,
a
wait, just really quick as a total. So
Go
my
ahead.
aesthetic, I guess you could say, would be fear,
Well, first,
and on the dark side.
I would just like to say, if you want to leave knowing that you're probably not going to sleep for a good several nights, play Geo's campaign. That's okay. Just put that note out there.
It's not all that, but yeah.
It's not all that, but okay.
Not completely. It's just 80% of the dungeon. Not a lot. You still have some nice people in there.
Like literally, the first dungeon in my campaign is a haunted house.
Douglas,
First campaign. Never.
your view, sir,
My
on your
views
own
on-
personal aesthetics.
Your own aesthetic towards dungeons.
It's just, again, I like fighting. It's the reason why I enjoy.
Beat 'em ups.
I enjoy not so much beat 'em ups, but like just the fighting, just fighting styles in games.
That's a fighting dungeon is called a beat 'em up.
Oh well, thank you. I'm sorry.
Geo, don't get sassy.
My brain is. I've been taking in a lot of calls today. My brain is on the fritz. So, the reason why I chose it is just because it's fun and there's always something to keep you busy. There's which is why I like how my dungeon is. There's always something to remind you nothing is safe. And there's always danger around every corner. The only difference is it's not much of a horror aspect, more of like a survival kind of thing. So you're not there to you don't sense fear because the whole point is not for you to sense fear. The whole point is for you to feel that inner warrior inside of you to make you feel like, okay, I just killed a whole bunch of people. I feel great. But then you turn to your side into another group and you're just like.
I imagine that your dungeons are a lot like animes.
Yeah, think of them as like anime fight sequences.
We're literally just killing swathes of enemies.
And then it all comes up to like that one moment where it's like, like one of the main characters goes down. He's like, "No, Okihisaka-san! Oh, you cannot leave me, Okihisaka-san! I need you!" "No, Timmy-san. You had me inside the Ryu. All wrong." "Really?" "Yes. You are the
Okay,
true
Doug.
chosen one."
That's racist, Doug. You're
Super
trying to appeal to a mass audience, Doug. Yeah.
You're right. I'm sorry, Brazilians.
What?
oh
Oh, we just lost 9.2% of our audience.
my God! Yes, Doug, shut up. oh, this is so fucked up. Okay, yes. Continue.
This is how
Um,
we lose everything.
Me personally, I like the aesthetic of loss, which is a difficult concept to make into an aesthetic, but most of my dungeons revolve around that sort of theme. Um,
I could see that.
well, yeah, I mean, there was
No
Lucille,
spoilers.
and then there was the Crystal Doe. She literally
Spoilers.
lost her head. Yeah, spoilers, people. There's no context for these. And then again, Solus, I mean, shh, Jesus. This is just a whole fuck fest. And it's difficult to create that, but the best way to do it is, in my designs, I usually have a hero aspect that is already there, but that hero usually isn't successful. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the hero is just powerful enough with the help of the group to circum the odds that were placed against him originally. But in terms of pure aesthetics, I like classic dungeon aesthetics. Moss, cobblestone, can't get enough of that shit. Is it super old school? Yes. Am I a basic bitch for doing it? Yes. Do I give a fuck? No. But for me, on a personal level, when I go out of that, I actually kind of like open world dungeons, which are kind of hard for me to figure out. But the one time I did do it, it felt kind of cool because it doesn't have this confining feeling, which can also lead to a sort of feeling of protection because you're not able to be attacked from all sides. There's just front and back, and then sometimes above if the ceiling's high enough. But open world is like a really fun journey for me to make. And that's all I've got to say on that. Let's talk about bosses. Isn't a subject that we were making all on its own, were we?
No.
All right. We actually don't have a whole lot of time left.
No.
Let's close on bosses.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, let's close on bosses.
Shush, Douglas. This is my turn to start. So here's the thing with bosses. You can design a boss that's really powerful, really moving emotionally, and could kick everybody's ass. Players will always find a way around that shit. Always. Now, it might not be every group, and it might not even be any group that you run into for a long time, but there will always be a group that figures out how to beat your boss in one turn. So don't get hung up on it. If you do feel the need to fuck with them, though, feel free to change the stats. You're the DM. Now, some people will call you a dirtbag for doing that. Those people are wrong, and you need to kick them out of your life. You don't need that kind of negativity there, right? My personal favorite villain or boss, really, is the group foil or the hero foil. Whoever your hero is for the dungeon or whoever your group is, making a polar opposite to that. I mean, that's always something that the party is going to be able to identify with, because it's simple and it's easy to grasp upon. Gio,
Yes.
you discuss bosses now.
Kafka.
Let's see, bosses. I don't know, because bosses are kind of a tricky thing for me.
They don't
I
have to
have-
be ugly.
No, they don't. I never said that. Bosses are a kind of tricky thing for me because, like I said, I tend to be a bit too grandiose because I feel in life it's better for someone to tell you to dial back than to go too far. But
Indeed.
and I tend like I guess I would say for those people wondering how to go mechanically, because I can't really talk about creative aesthetic when it comes to bosses, because my bosses are usually, rather than themed towards the party, are themed towards the actual dungeon itself. Like, I had a dungeon entirely about elementals, and the final boss was a composite elemental. And not the one from the book, but there is an existing one in the book. But mechanical wise, I would tell people that if you're trying to look for a boss or several bosses, because there's nothing wrong with horde battles, if you're trying to look for a boss to match your group, literally do that. Take the total sum of levels of your group and make your boss equal or slightly above that. So that way they aren't like one-offing everything. And also put into account the magical items that they have and make sure that your monster either has a bonus against or a weakness towards it, because that could be best for the story. So they're like one of the best oh yeah moments is when you freaking slash at your enemy and you realize, holy shit, my sword does double the damage than usual because it's completely covered in fire. People go nuts over that shit.
They do. It's surprising.
When they feel like they're one-upping the boss, they get off it because it's a power trip, and sometimes you need to give your players that because the whole point of the game is to have fun. The whole point of the dungeon is to have fun. Like even if you want to punish your players and be masochistic, you still need to make it fun. So
Are you talking about me?
No, I'm talking about Dark Souls.
Oh.
So in terms of actual mechanics, when you're creating your boss, just try to look for something equal in level or bring it up to a level, because you could want your boss to be like a tiny fucking goblin that could just so happen take on 6 people. If that's what your story's about, if that's what it needs at the moment, then build it to that. Make it what you want and what you need, but mechanically make it accurate. Don't go too weak or too strong. Doug?
All right, Doug, you have a minute. Go.
Bosses. What are they? What do they mean? What is their point?
I said you have a minute. Let's not get philosophical, buddy.
Now, there's a reason why I have a little box with me. Because bosses, in the end of a dungeon, are pretty much the climax. That boss should pretty much be the build-up of that dungeon. If you don't have that build-up to that boss, then it's just like a wet noodle, per se. So, like in this beginner's manual of D&D, Lost Minds of Pathfinder.
Uh-huh.
It's a great dungeon that spawns quite a few levels until you reach the end and find the dragon. The whole aesthetics of like reaching to that point and fighting this final thing. I believe in terms of bosses, they are something that should basically be the bow of your dungeon.
All right. Well, I am Aaron Bryan from Table Knights Entertainment. With me today was Giovanni Perez Brodo and Douglas Conrado. Next week, we'll be talking about popular and unpopular classes. This will be primarily opinion-based, I suppose.
Is your shit...
Except for mines. Mines are fact.
That's right, Gio, because you're always right.
Right.
Don't forget to like, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a
Yeah.
comment if you want. Talk shit about us. We'd love it.
Yeah,
Alright.
please. I'll send Geo
Fucker.
on you. I will sick him on you,
No,
and he
don't
will
do that.
destroy you.
Don't give me that kind of pressure.
So remember, next week, is your character shit? I mean, is your class shit? Are you picking too mainstream shit? Or you just think that guy sucks because he only has the thief tools?
Douglas,
Tune
you're
in next
shit.
time.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
And talk
From all
to
of us here at Table Knights Entertainment, roll on.